So yeah, I painted Thor, and I'm really happy with him because I'm branching out from Slapchop using more traditional painting techniques driven by the army painter Warpaints Fanatics, which makes the process a lot easier, as you'll see. And this video is going to be a bit longer than usual because the Thor model is somewhat complex, and we're going to be covering skin, hair, cloth, and fur. So buckle in. So enjoy as we paint Thor from the Mythic Battles Ragnarok set. We're on an epic quest to paint the entire set. Enjoy.
Okay, I got everything ready and I'm diving right in. First things first, the undercoat. I figure Thor will be on a base that's partially Arctic, so I want a cool bluish undercoat. I'm shooting my airbrush from below, sort of an anti-Zenithal. With the undercoat done, we dive right in and start with the face. Yes, that's right. Start with the face, because I figure if I'm going to do a crappy face, why the heck I am even painting Thor? But we go in cautiously using plenty of water and acrylic medium. We want to make sure some of our undercoat shows through to cool down our model. But we've got our palette out, and we've got the Warpaints Fanatics full spectrum of face colors to help us out. So let's go forth boldly and get a face here. I actually started on the right side of the palette with the darker shade, applying that sparingly on the part that is undershaded blue. I am now putting the lightest shade of the color scheme on the model that has the brightest Zenithal highlighting. Now we want to start building up the mid-tone, the color that's in between the brightest and the darkest, and we want to apply it between the brightest parts that we just painted and the shaded parts that we painted prior. We're being cautious here, using plenty of water and or medium. While we're doing the face, let's also not forget the hands. There's not much going on there with this model, so we can make it fast and simple. Now I want to try to build up the shadows on the lower part of the face, but I don't want to obliterate my undercoat. So that's why I use plenty of medium and or water to make sure that I can still see some of the undercoat. To try to kick it up a level, I am going to do more shadowy colors on the right side of his face from this perspective, because obviously from this perspective the light is coming from the left. So we overdid it a little bit on the high tone. Now we want to come back and control it with the mid-tone. And if you haven't noticed already, we're not doing Slapchop anymore, my friends. We are branching out and trying more traditional methods. Reason being, the classes I've attended, plus the Warpaints Fanatics, gives us a solid palette to work from, one that we can easily rebuild. For example, if your cat walked across your palette right now, you could rebuild this palette in 60 seconds exactly the same, thanks to Warpaints Fanatics. Now, while this color is active on our palette, we want to go and hit the hands, build up some color on the hands. It's easy to let the hands fall behind when you're concentrating on the face, so don't forget the hands. Also take note, I'm using a sable brush, and you'll notice on the palette screen I give the brush a little twist on the way out. And that gives me a really fine point. That's how I can use this big brush to do these fine details. Don't let the lips fall behind either. Gotta build up the layers the same as the cheeks. So there you go. The trick of it is to map out your high, middle, and low tones with the help of your zenithal and your undershade, and then start blending the in-between colors and painting those in-between areas with smaller and smaller areas and smaller amounts of paint. Use plenty of acrylic medium to make it controllable, and I got a pretty good result. According to the reference art, we can go with glowing eyes, which is good news for us. More on that later. For now, let's work our way out from the face and hit the beard. Warpaint Fanatics offers us a nice little palette ready to go for this beard, so let's dive right in. This yellow palette has plenty of white in it already. That makes it nice for blonde hair, actually. So I start near the middle with the brightest, most intense yellow, and I paint that on the areas of the hair that are catching the most light. This is already mapped out for me by my zenithal. I now need a deeper shade, so I introduce a little bootstrap brown. I'm now going to take that shaded yellow and apply it in the shadows of the hair. And some of that will benefit from the blue undercoat we did prior. So my wet palette was a little too wet on the left side, and that's the result. You get some bleeding, but it was okay on the right side, so we soldier on. After roughing in all the shadows and getting good coverage, we then break into the middle of the palette and start doing some brighter yellows. So the technique is a little similar to painting the face, in that we start with the brightest colors first, and then the deepest shadows, and then we try to work our way in between. We use the palette, we blend in between colors. We use plenty of medium for control and translucency, and occasionally use a wash to even things out. You end up with a pretty smooth result, and it's not that much slower than Slapchop. The effort invested in a little extra time results in a much better output, and it is worth it. Remember, you can blend washes. I like the combination of these two for blonde hair. The Warpaint Fanatics line also offers a wash medium, but I just used water in this case. So everyone has their own way of doing hair. You know, if you can get by without washes, go for it. Washes help us newbie and intermediate painters get smoother blends. So whatever works for you, that's what's going to work for you. How do you like to paint hair? You got a link for me? Put it in the comments. Now I'm going to a lighter color and trying to paint a smaller area. Again, using plenty of medium to give me some leeway and control. We could stop there and it would be pretty good, but let's kick it up a notch and let's attack that harsh highlight with a slightly darker color and again, plenty of medium. We'll hit the jewelry and the headband later, but after these steps, we're calling the hair done. And even though speed paint over Zenithal is amazing, I actually think this looks better and it only takes a little bit more time. And right now, it looks nice. I don't really want to push it further because I probably don't know how, and it's time to move on to clothing. Finally, since I think Thor should be wearing blue, I finally have a chance to use the vivid blue color sequence from Warpaint Fanatics. We're going to have fun with our palette because we're laying out all 6 of these paints. As usual, we're going to work from the inside out, starting with the darkest color first. Skipping ahead a little, I added some bootstrap brown to the palette and got it into the blue mix for some leather straps that were right on his chest. Then we go back to the next color down the sequence and we're just doing some base coats here. Okay, so I'm trying to share with you guys something I learned in a 2-day masterclass. And this Grandmaster crazy good artist loves his wide flat brush. He says he does most of his work with it, and that astounded most of us in the class. But what I'm trying to do here is, quote unquote, rough out some highlights. The idea, of course, we're going to smooth them out later. So the fun thing about this process is the first coat was translucent, so I can see through it and I can see my Zenithal. And I'm using that as a guide for these wide brush strokes to, quote unquote, rough out some highlights. It doesn't have to be perfect. Be painterly with it. Just try to get it approximately where the Zenithal is. The Zenithal that you did that shows us where the light is coming from. Now we're going to go to the lightest color in our sequence and using plenty of medium or water, hit an even smaller area, again guided by our Zenithal and our previous highlights. And yes, it looks pretty rough, but we're going to try to smooth it all out later. Now we're just going to create a wash out of the midtone and hit everything. You might have to do this 2 or 3 times. I used a blow jar between coats, so it went pretty fast. Forgive me for reaching back and getting a Speedpaint 1.0 hardened leather. You got to be careful though, this stuff reactivates like a muff. I love Speedpaints because they save me time. These small leather bits are not the focus of the model, but they look great with Speedpaints over Zenithal. It turns out that Norse Vikings wore unbleached linen, so I want to paint that, but I don't want a gray undercoat for that, and I want to do a sort of slap chop on this gray cloth. I do not want to spend a lot of time on it, so I'm going to quickly re-undercoat with white. For the boots, I thought I could sneak in a little cold red onto the palette. Now I'm going to hit those cloth parts with strong tone, which turned out to be perfect for this job. Although, because these areas are fairly small on this model, I'm sure you could pick out a speed paint to do something similar. While we're at it, let me know your technique for doing cloth. Just let me know in the comments, even post a link. So for bootstraps and some other odds and ends, I'm using sepia tone. This stuff is great. It does not reactivate and it stains what's underneath it. I'm sure I'm going to find more uses for this one. Dry brushing with an off-white, pops highlights, desaturates, makes it look a bit rough, and thus more like cloth. Thor's coming along pretty good. Now let's do some metal. By the way, Thor's belt is called Meginurud, a powerful artifact. Google it. It's got a cool backstory. Okay, I'm not quite good enough for NMM, the non-metallic metals technique, but I will use the technique for TMM, true metallic metals, where at least I use a base metal, a shade, and a highlight metal. The Warpaint Fanatics set gives you a triad of metals. Basically, you have a dark, and a medium, and a bright silver for the metals. My triad will be gunmetal, mid-tone will be plate metal, and the highlight will be shining silver. Right now I'm applying gunmetal on the most shaded areas of the metal. Now I'm applying the brightest silver I have, the mithril silver, over the metal that is under the most direct lighting. The idea is I want to shade it down later and put some pigments in those recesses. We're going to do the same thing for all these little coins and bobbins that Thor has. Every little bit of metal should have a base, a highlight, and a shade. Okay, the top of Thor's gloves is catching some light, so bright silver is going there. Hey, but wait a second, we have got to say something about these gloves. These magical gauntlets were known as the Yarn Griper, literally translated as iron grippers. Again, they have a cool backstory. And now we'll paint the universally recognized Mjolnir. In our game Mythic Battles Ragnarok, Thor can hurl his hammer to any target on the game map without needing line of sight. Everyone's going to paint Mjolnir differently. I thought I would try cobalt metal. Looking back, I should have darkened it with death metal to give me more contrast with my lightning effects. I'm curious how you would paint Mjolnir. Let me know in the comments what you think your favorite paint scheme for this famous mythic hammer would be. Now let's talk fur. The Warpaint Fanatics gives us plenty of choices for palette, and here I went sort of diagonally across the browns. I really wanted to put the Flexible Triad idea to work. Now obviously, one thing about painting fur is you can do no wrong. Just have fun. I wanted to get the impression that this large fur cloak was made of different parts of fur, and it's going to be a patchwork of different colors, so I could have fun with it. My general strategy, my general idea, was to jam the really dark colors up into the fur where I think there should be a lot of shadows. I tried to take advantage of my blue undercoat, so there is some translucency. I am using some medium and or some water. And initially I'm seeking to get good coverage because there's a lot of surface area on this cloak. So again, I don't want to take too much time, so I'm going to lay down the colors and then see what I can do about smoothing them out after I get coverage. I'm glad I tried this wash, Sepia Tone from the Warpaints Fanatics set. It's a lot of fun. It works just like the Artist's Ink Sepia. And for the fur, I think it looks great. It helps smooth out the differences between the colors. Okay, so I'm painting the fur on top, and it's near his blonde hair. So I'm going to go ahead with the light brown, but I'm going to need some more contrast. I'm hoping I can build up some contrast with a wash or two. Okay, now that we have good coverage and we've thrown down a wash on the cloak, it's time for a little dry brushing. So I go to the high end of the palette and I load up a dry brush just a little bit, and I'm going to go for some careful dry brushing. I use a little bit of medium to give me some translucency. That's more control and more easily build up the highlight color that I want. And now it's time for your friend and mine, the oil wash. Yes, oil wash is mainstream now. Everyone is using it. Look how nicely the pigments flow into chainmail with oil paints. While the oil wash is drying, I quickly did a base, and I wanted to give the impression that Thor travels through many different terrain types in his adventures, so I'm going to go for some green, some rocky, some mud, and some snow. First, let's quickly apply some super glue to get some rocky substrate down. Then we throw down a little brown paint and a little white paint to get ready for some mud and snow. Sprinkle on some pigments. That should make a good looking mud. I like Vallejo, I just happen to have it lying around. Now we're going to have fun with some basing materials. I have links to this stuff in the description. The water effects comes from the Model Train Hobby, and the Green Stuff World has all kinds of basing stuff. If you use this dipping inks right, it looks like ice. It's pretty cool. The trick with dipping inks is you got to know when to stop so you don't overblend them. On top of that, we're going to mash on a little snow. This again is from the Arctic Basing Kit from Green Stuff World. The link is in the description. Don't go yet. I have a real visual treat for those that stuck around, and thank you so much for letting me share my painting of Thor with you. We're on an epic adventure to paint all of Mythic Battles Ragnarok. Now, while we appreciate all the hard work that we put into this piece, and we can admire the details and the cool looking leather and fur and cloth that we got, hang on a second, because I input my artwork into Runway ML, and we're going to animate Thor, and we're going to leave it at that. It's going to be awesome, so look forward to the next episode with you as we continue our epic quest to paint all of Mythic Battles Ragnarok. It's a ton of hard work. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.